of these like oracular models where I should just talk to a model in a chat box and it should be able to do anything. I really think that's sort of to the AI industry what Formula One cars are like to the automobile industry, right? You're trying to beat your chest and show, look how complicated our technology is, but you're not selling a lot of Formula One cars because they're completely impractical and they don't really work well on the roads. The future is probably going to be taking that technology, much more energy efficient and smaller and cost effective to run, embedded more closely into particular use cases. And those foundation models, I think, are really just a measuring contest of sorts, if you know what I mean, between these companies to show like we have the best technology, so that when we then sell you these more specialized tools, you're like, oh, that's the name. I remember McLaren because you won the F1 race. You must make good cars.
But they're not selling us the specialized models. They're selling us, they're like giving away the Formula One cars.
Yeah, it's a terrible business model. GPT-3 was really good. It was unusable for the average person because it would go off on weird flights of fancy, but it did really well for scientists. Then GPT-3.5 was just that tuned to behave well with humans. They tuned it to be good at conversation. That really was a big leap. GPT-4 was an even bigger leap. They made it 5x bigger. We assume they don't actually give the numbers, but they made it much bigger. And they began to realize that not only was GPT-4 good at language, but it was good at other tasks. That in learning language, it was doing well on logic puzzles. We could ask it questions about board games. We could give it, and that was the really exciting moment where for researchers like, oh, if we keep making language models bigger, they're going to learn lots of stuff that's not just language. And that's how they thought maybe we'll get AGI. That slowed down after GPT-4. They tried to make it even bigger. This was at the time called Project Orion at OpenAI. They said, great, let's make it 5 or 10x bigger than GPT-4. And it didn't get better. But so this happened though, and they realized it, but were being kind of quiet about it. They hit a wall in just plain scaling. When that Project Orion, and then Meta had a similar issue, Grok saw a similar issue. Like everyone was seeing the same thing where, oh, we can't just keep making things bigger. We're not going to be able to just pure scale our way to AGI. And then we got a whole year. It started with the O1 models and the reasoning models, and we got all of these other much more complicated things. Remember, all of this got so much more complicated where what the models looked like they were chemical equations for organic chemistry class. And they were talking about reasoning and post inference computation, all this. This was all just trying to now find little narrow places where we could tune to get some advantage or different types of ways to get better performance out of them on benchmarks. It was actually the beginning of the end of pure scaling. I happen to think the way AGI is going to happen, I call it distributed or slow takeoff AGI. I don't think it's going to be, here is a single program that now no matter what we ask it to do, it does this at the level of a human. I think what we're going to see instead is it's going to be more boring. Lots of different systems tuned to lots of different things that humans do, very specialized, that get really good. And at some point, we're going to look around and say, there is a huge swath of things that are hard that humans do that all now have individualized AI type systems that can do that thing just as well or better than humans. More of a piecemeal. I think that's much more likely and much more cost effective and makes much more business sense than this idea of we just need a super AI that does all of these things. And we already see it now, like, oh, we're better at chess, we're better at poker, we're better at Go, we're getting better at proteins. That's, it's more piecemeal. Each of these systems is going to need its own mix of technologies and its own secret sauce. But that's much more likely to get us to a point where we say, wait a second, computers are doing a lot of what we do better than us.
And yet it's not, that take isn't going to get any headlines written about it.
Well, I mean, I like to tell the story of there's these cool bots that came out. There's a particular researcher who's done a lot of cool AI. And the two things, I think he's at OpenAI now, but back at Carnegie Mellon and Meta, he built the first system to beat human poker players, professional poker players at Texas Hold'em, called Pluribus. And he built the first machine that could competitively play diplomacy, which, is like a Risk-like board game with lots of interhuman negotiation. But the storyline of both of those, it's very clever combination of existing technologies. So for the poker playing bot, they actually tried at first to just scale into a machine that worked. They built really large neural networks. They were training them at the Supercomputer Center at the University of Pittsburgh, and they weren't that good. And ultimately, the system that beat the professional players could fit on a laptop. And it was much more, they had a very smart combination of some neural networks, some future prediction, and they kind of tuned it up, and it was better at poker. The diplomacy playing bot, similar. There's a language model in there. There's a future simulator in there.
Okay.
If you read the research paper around it, they just casually say at some point, oh, for ethical reasons, we set it up so it'll never lie. Even though that's like a major strategy in diplomacy, you fake out people, you make false alliances or whatever. For
Uh-huh.
ethical reasons, they said, oh, we just set it up so it wouldn't lie. You're like, well, wait a second. I thought the whole issue with AI is we can't
They
align
lie
it.
a
It's
lot.
out of control.
Yeah.
But when you build these specialized AIs,
Right.
it's not just some giant neural network. You don't know how it works. It's 6 or 7 components. We know what they do. And it was
And they're
very
they're
easy.
taking concrete information from here, and
Yes.
then they are putting it over here. And so what you're saying is, if it knows this information, it can't be like, I'm gonna tell the people a different thing.
Yeah, well, there's literally a piece of it that
'Cause
simulates possible future moves and to try to measure like which of these might be best. They wrote that. That simulator is not a neural
it's
network. They
code.
just
Yeah.
they wrote it and they
Yeah.
just coded it to say, don't look at possibilities where you lie. So it doesn't. I call that intentional AI or IAI. Like the idea is when you move away from all we have as a language model, which is what we're trying to do now, which I think is a real problem. Let
Mhm.
a inscrutable language model be the brain for everything. If you want to build an agent to
Right.
go do something, ask a
Right.
language model what to do and just execute it blindly. But
Yeah.
IAI is like these game playing bots, which I think are great
Mhm.
examples of what AI might be. And you have a control module in these is written by humans in normal computer code. There's nothing unknown about it. There's nothing that's learned. There's nothing that evolves, and it can talk to neural networks to understand things,
Mhm.
or to get descriptions of things, or to come up with ideas. But it's just a normal human control program that can decide what do we want to do? What are the options that we're actually looking at? I'm more optimistic about this world of distributed AGI. I don't think it's going to be out of control. I think this alignment problem is really a problem about language model text production and being able to control what text language models produce, not necessarily fundamental to AI powered devices more generally. Well, the obvious things that would click would be natural language interfaces in the software, make everyone 5 times better at using tools, right? Like I'm not great at Microsoft Excel. Why not give me a natural language interface where I could say, hey, go through, I don't know what commands to do, but get rid of all the rows where the dollar amount in column B is above
Mhm.
$5 and then sort
Yeah.
it on this column. But what I've heard from my sources is that would be the obvious way. It'd make all your software more valuable, right? It's not working. Actually, the hallucination rate of LLMs means
Ooh.
if you're talking to an LLM and then it's translating that into commands that'll be executed by the
Yeah.
software, it makes too many mistakes. And so
I've seen
actually,
this and using tools like that, Airtable has a tool like this, and I'm like, yeah, build me a little workflow, and then it's like, oh, now I have to do a bunch of work fixing your weird mistakes.
when we're chatting with these chatbots, we underestimate the degree to which we're constantly sort of interpreting and correcting and fixing
Yeah,
and asking the
yeah,
question a
yeah.
different way. And so, like a lot of these other obvious use cases of like, great, we can now have this be an intermediary between humans and the whole world of computation, which I think is a very exciting proposition. They're struggling with that one.
If it turns out that all the valuation is based on actually only giant companies can do this, so you have to buy into one of the big three, that still leads us to a world where the bubble pops. Yes.
Yeah, the spending doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And the spending is largely being done by a small number of companies right now. And it just doesn't make sense.
It would be very unlikely, it seems to me, that this IAI thing happens fast enough to fill in the value gap that has been created.
Well, I just don't think it requires the level of investment that Microsoft
Mm.
and OpenAI and Anthropic, like the level of investment these companies are making. You don't need it for something like that future of specialized machines. Again, the Pluribus, which can beat in a tournament with real money on the line, real Texas Hold'em players can run on a laptop. And it uses some really smart neural networks and some other really smart things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the level of spending now doesn't make sense. It's bubble like.